So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to look for examples of this word of wisdom in the scriptures. And so we're going to look at several examples from the Old Testament, because this one really is evident in a lot of places, but we're only going to look at a few. The first of those is in the life of Bezalel. If you remember in Exodus 31, it's in Exodus 31, 1 through 11, God told Moses to build the tabernacle, all the furnishings, so forth and so on. And when he did, there was a man named Bezalel, and the Lord specifically says that he's put wisdom in Bezalel so that he'll know how to do all these things. So Bezalel did not build the temple and the tabernacle because he was such a brilliant guy. I'm sure he was brilliant. There's no question about that. But he didn't rely on his brilliance. He relied upon the wisdom that was divinely implanted in him to know how to do that. Another example is seen in the life of Gideon in Judges chapter 7, verses 4 to 7. Gideon called for the men of Israel to come, and there were too many that come. There were 32,000 or something like that came, and the Lord says, I can't deliver you by these because there's too many, and you all will take the credit for it. Need to reduce the army. So tell everybody that's afraid to go home. And he did so, and now he's down to 10,000. The army was divided by only a third remaining. And then the Lord says, no, it's still too many. Take them down to the water and let them drink, and by this we'll figure out who should go with you. And after they went down, the certain ones that drank a certain way stayed, and the others were told to leave. And wound up being 300. And see, this was the wisdom of God. It was given to Gideon in a word, and he was able to use that and reduce the army down to the size that the Lord wanted so that he would be glorified. Another example, and this is probably one of the most famous examples of the word of wisdom in the Old Testament. In the early days of King Solomon, there were two women that came, and one of them had rolled over and smashed her baby in the night, and she had traded babies with the other lady. And they were fighting and arguing over whose baby. And, Solomon hears this argument of these two women, and he asks for a sword. And he says, give me a sword and give me the child. And he says, I'm going to divide the child and give half to each one of them, and you all can go your way. And, of course, the real mother said, oh, no, give the child to her, but don't divide the child. And the other woman said, well, that sounds like a great idea. And, of course, Solomon knew immediately, and everybody there knew who the real mother was. And see, that's the way the word of wisdom works. It gives you a specific answer to a specific problem, a specific way of doing things. Sometimes it's relational. Sometimes it's in a conflict of some sort. Whatever. There's all kinds of different reasons and ways that wisdom's necessary. And you don't have it. You don't have it by nature. You don't have it by learning. You don't have it by any experience or anything. But then all of a sudden, right at the key minute, you know what to do. You may not feel like you've had any particular word, but you just simply know what to do. It may not even be a word in the sense of like an extended message. You just simply know how to handle a situation. Sometimes it is a word, and sometimes it's not even necessarily needed to be shared. This is an interesting gift. It's not necessarily something that has to be shared all the time. It just simply shows you how to handle a situation. And so that's why this is one of the more subtle of the gifts. The word of knowledge operates similarly, and we'll talk about that in the next video. But that was in 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 through 28. There's another example in the life of Elisha. Now, Elisha, and we're all familiar with the story, because Elisha was in the little town of Dothan, and the whole Syrian army comes to get him because he's been telling the king of Israel where all the ambushes are. And so the king of Syria says, let's go get this guy. Well, they surrounded this little village, an unarmed, unwalled village, and Elisha's there. Elisha's servant goes out and says, we have a problem. We've got all these, whole army of Syria is surrounding us. Elisha says, it's okay, just relax, because there's more that are with us than are with them. And then he says, Lord, open this young man's eyes that he may see. And he saw, of course, the chariots and so forth surrounding the mountains, and the chariots of God. And we all are familiar with this story. Well, what happens is that Elisha commands, and the people are all struck blind. So the whole army of Syria is groping around, and they're completely blind, and they don't know what to do. Well, Elisha leads them into the city of Samaria. Now, this is the part of the story that's a little less familiar to us. You can find it. It's in 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 21 and following. He leads them into the city of Samaria, which was the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel. And when they get there, the king, he commands that he asks the Lord to open their eyes, and all of a sudden they're completely, eyes are restored, and they are realized that they're surrounded by their enemies in the middle of the city of Samaria. And the king of Israel asks Elisha, what are we supposed to do with them? Are we supposed to kill them? And Elisha says, no. Feed them and then let them go home. And as a result of that act of kindness, they fed them, they let them go home. The Syrians stopped invading Israel. And it was, the prophet knew exactly what to do. And there's a lot of things happening in that story, but the one we were focusing on right now is that he knew what to do in that circumstance. He knew exactly what to do. He knew exactly where to take them. He knew exactly how to advise the king, and then the problem went away. Of course, we can't escape, as examples in the Old Testament, the entire book of Proverbs is an example of words of wisdom. I mean, every single sentence in that book is examples of words of wisdom. And we can open it up and we can read those because those are preserved for us. Words of wisdom are not always preserved for us, and they're not always even meant to be preserved for us, because most of the time, especially in our modern day, they are for a particular situation, and they help us understand. I'm going to read the definition one more time. A supernatural communication that includes information regarding how to handle a specific situation.